Pain teaches you more than pleasure. Failure will teach you more than success.
My youngest son ran away. He left a suicide note. He borrowed some money and got to Miami in the hope to buy a gun so he could shoot himself, and I was determined not to lose this child.
And at the age of 21, I escaped back to my parents, only to be met with furious fists as I had dishonoured my father and family.
What were your thoughts? What was going through your mind?
I just didn't want to be anymore. You know, I remember laying in almost a bath of my own blood.
So yeah, Nina, we talk a little bit about property and finance and them things. You told me you dabble in a little bit of property, is that right?
Yeah, so I originally I didn't when I met my children's father, he was renting a place in a place called Leicester, and we moved into a nicer place called Market Harborough, which is when I met him. And to cut a long story short, I wanted to make my dad proud. So maybe it wasn't the right reasons I was doing it. I was wanting to prove to him that I'm just as good as a boy. My father has a huge portfolio of houses. He owns over 200 to 300 houses.
Wow.
And growing up, regardless of the negative things in my life, I was the one who would often help with bookkeeping, ordering beer and things from the brewery from a really young age because I spoke well. Even though I didn't have the interaction with them, I was still learning. You still absorb what you're around. And my father was a very acute businessman to get to where he's got to today. Although his morals I don't agree with, and I'm not condoning his behaviour. But I wanted to be that boy that he'd be proud of, because obviously he didn't like me because I was a girl. So when I moved and had my daughter, my instinctive thing was to provide for her. And I went from, having nothing to having a mobile phone business to renting a property. And then I wanted to buy that property because my father always said, you should never rent. And I was really good at negotiating. I negotiated that property for 8,000 at the time.
8,000?
8,000. It's a small shop. It's a small shop in Leicestershire. I mean, it's worth probably over 300,000 now, but I haven't got it, unfortunately. But and then I bought a house because I saw I could see a vision of a house that was on the corner, obviously, with a lot of land behind it, land on the side. So it was a really beautiful plot overlooking fields. And I had this vision of duplicating the house, which I did. And I turned it into an 8-bedroom house with a double garage. It's really nice. And again, I saw a property next to me. I had this vision that I'd own the whole street at one point. And there's nothing wrong with aiming high. And I asked the post office who was selling that property, can I rent your property with an agreement in the lease that I can buy it for the same price you're asking for it now? Because I knew that would give me time to get that money together. And I bought that property for 250,000, and now it's worth, now that I've put some building applications just gone through, it'll be worth just 1.2 for the building that I've put through, and the bottom pot's probably worth about 800. So,
wow. So you got an option lease agreement.
Yeah,
so like
which didn't exist. It didn't exist, but I created it with the agent, yeah.
Wow, do you know these are actually strategies used by some of the top property gurus right now, that they show you how to do these things, and I didn't know. You didn't even know what you were doing.
Didn't know what I was doing.
I want to buy it later, I'll sort your payments out right now.
Yeah.
And later on,
I fall in love with buildings. I love architecture and I love old buildings, and it was a real prominent building in the town centre of Market Harborough, which is like one of the best places to live according to Google. It's literally an hour away from London. The property is a walking distance from the station. I had it all in my head from 30, 40 years ago in my head what I was going to do. So yeah, it was just a really beautiful building, and I just wanted it so much that I was willing it to happen, not knowing how I would. But I always have this theory that if you want something really bad, you'll find a way, you'll find a solution. And I did. I managed to I remortgaged my home. I got an additional loan from the bank, and I got credit cards, and I made it happen.
You played about.
I bought it for 150, that building.
Brilliant. So you mentioned just a minute ago that you set up a mobile phone shop.
I did originally. That was my first business.
How did you do that?
Well, I was renting from an Indian family who had a news agent, maybe like your dad possibly had. And I was always bored, so I would take my little girl. She was a baby down there, and they used to fuss over her a lot. And I remember going down there one day, and this chap walked in, and he was talking about easy money, and my ears just propped up. I was this almost single mother, I have to say, supporting my child. And I followed him to his car and I said to him, "Oh, sorry, excuse me. Sorry to interrupt." He's standing there with his big Mercedes with his brogues on and his dark denim jeans and his check shirt. I remember it really clearly. And I said to him, "Could I just ask you about what you were talking about?" And he said, "Oh, I sell mobile phones, but you won't understand." And he said, not to worry, dear, and sort of submits to me. But normally when people say no to me, it makes me want to try it harder because that's all I've had from birth. So I let him go. I decided I was going to go down to the phone box, and this is after a few hours. It had got dark. I wrapped my daughter up in a pushchair, ran down to the phone box, had to prise the door open with her buggy, rang 192 because in those days we didn't really have access to Google and things, and got the details because I know he was from Kettering because I heard him in conversation saying to the lady, "So which is the best way to Kettering?" So I assumed he was from Kettering. Kettering's a small place. And I got the details and I wrote him a contract because obviously we didn't have computers or printers. I'm going back to the early 90s. And I wrote him a contract saying that if you agree to do business with me, I guarantee I will sell this many units every month. And I did so well that he did really well, but also Orange came straight to me, who are EE now, saying we would like to sponsor you to have a shop for us and sell for us directly. We'll send you on training. You can have staff, we'll help train the staff. And it just went on from there. But then the mobile phone industry was becoming saturated. So I was looking at what else do people need. And when they would come in, I had this habit of just people person, So what are you looking for? Printers, computers are coming in now. I also placed my daughter into a more expensive nursery I could barely afford. And every time the bill was coming through, I'd always be, oh gosh, the bill's about to come. I need to keep that money aside. But that's where all the doctors went, the nurses went, all the professionals from the local town. So I would go to pick her up at the time they would go to pick up their children. And it was that networking thing. I gauged that from an early age that it's knowing the right people, making yourself known to them. And I had a coffee machine that I'd bought from, I think, eBay at the time. And I would say to them, "Come over and have a coffee at my shop if you're ever around in the town centre." And they did. And when they would sit down and they were relaxed, they would buy whatever I was selling them because they bought into me as a person. And I think that's key. Being an authentic, genuine person, people keep coming back to you. So they needed LED screens because obviously plasmas had just started. They were quite expensive, but they could afford these things. And I would, always listen to people. That's another skill a lot of people don't have, is listening to what somebody really wants instead of telling them what they need. And I would just find them the solutions to their needs, really.
It's phenomenal in that one little paragraph what you've just explained to me. You've explained so many things that, we teach in mentorship. Do you know what I mean? Is they say your network is your net worth. And you saw that just getting your child in a certain environment also got you into an environment, so there's more opportunities and how people will buy into you. So by you showcasing your personality, people are looking, I really like Nina. You don't have to be the cheapest around. People just got to know they like you, they like your service, and now they can come to you, right?
Yeah, no, totally. And I was a person of my word. I always had that integrity, which a lot of people didn't have in my town or still don't have. I was integral. So if I said I would do something, I've always done it. And, people that know me now will vouch for that.
100. And it's just amazing because another thing, what my father always says to me, he says, "Sean, do a lot of parents do tell their children, but not everybody chooses to listen."
Mm-hmm.
And that's such an important skill, what you just mentioned, that you listened,
I think a lot of parents don't listen to their children, if I'm being honest. I've made that mistake myself. I haven't often said to my children, "How are you?" Because as parents, it's difficult. We're trying to provide all the time.
Yes.
So sometimes we get dissuaded, or we're checking a phone, or we're looking over the shoulder at whatever someone's doing in the background, not really focused on that person. And I think one of the things going forward for children is for them to feel heard, but also to be seen.
Yes. I agree with you. I have many different relationships with my father, though. So my dad is like an army soldier as well, because he's like the businessman, the shiny armored guy like in my life. And whenever I've got a problem, issue, he's the guy. And he'll never go be flustered or anything. He'll just be like, "It's okay. We'll deal with it." Even if he's worried, because I know now from this point of view. But then if I'm like going out with my dad, then he goes into friend mode, and Sean's my friend, and he'll show that to his friends as well. So I do get a little bit of that side, and then sometimes we're on a badminton court together,
Oh, nice.
but he's quite raw in badminton.
Yeah,
What was you
competitive.
doing? Why didn't you get that? Like
I think that's lovely.
you know. So I think it's really important to have so many different relationships because he's the best man in my life. And so is my mum. That mum is very supportive. They have very different roles, but, I see both of them as my friends. Like, I'm 36, gonna be 37 next week. But it's like, I still feel that I'm like mummy and daddy's boy, and I'm an adult. I've got my own life, but I love, that friendship and bond I have with them also.
You're very blessed because a lot of other Asian boys will be feeling your way. It's just the girls that don't.
Yeah. So I went to a networking event at Savoy's. Plugging you in Savoy's, by the way. Brilliant events they have. And then I didn't know a lot of people. I don't network. That's been a little bit of my downfall, but I'm one of them people who wanted to put my head down and just work. And when I've got something to show for it, or when I've got something in my bank account, then it's worth networking because I've got some money to talk about. I know it isn't quite that way now. And, if people like you, you can make things happen. You can get lending. But me, I was a little bit old school that way. But when I went to this networking event, so many people come running up at me and they were like, Sean, right? I've been watching all your stuff. You're amazing. And I love your dad because I got him on the camera. So I was like, Dad, let me ask you a question. And my dad would just, man of very few words, but you'll think about it for about an hour. What did he just say? And so many people go, I love your dad. Do you know what? I've got closer to my dad since I've seen you with your dad.
Oh, wow, that's encouraging.
And that's quite impactful.
Were they men that said this?
It was one of them was men, yeah, and there was a girl as well who came up to me. She
Okay.
goes, I just love how you are with your dad and stuff.
That's encouraging.
But women do say that, I wish the family was more supportive of stronger women and women who want to choose entrepreneurship. And, it's okay to be a strong woman. It doesn't mean that she's being disrespectful or anything that shapes sort of nature. The world is a very different place. Who can afford a £500,000 house on their own? So you want a strong woman next to you anyway.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes. So after, you've set this mobile phone shop, then you set up a cafe, did you say?
No, one of my tenants.
Okay.
Because I was actually selling, it was a Tandy franchise. You probably don't know who they are, but it was an American franchise that sold parts for computers. It was almost like a part shop, but they just went bust. So I got to a point where I was working hard, really hard, and I decided it wasn't for me. It wasn't what I wanted to do. I could do what I was doing from home or from an office. So I decided to rent out my property to somebody else who became a sort of real nice cafe bar, very upmarket. And I let them look after paying me rent. So I was getting that additional income as opposed to just me creating the income from that space. And I learned that was the best option for all of the places because I had, 2 shops. So I ended up renting them both out and going into the top of the place myself and using the office space and what I needed, which meant I was duplicating the income that I was probably going to make, and it was a lot easier for me.
Right. Okay. And your property journey, has it continued from there, or have you
No,
just
it
been
came
content
to a
with that?
standstill. I was one that really wanted to pay my mortgage off like the minute I got it. A lot of people don't do that, but I had got the mortgage, and at the end of each year I would pay a lump sum off that I would save up. Even if it was only a couple of thousand, I would do it because it was paying it off more than it would done otherwise. So the house was paid off, all the properties are paid off. It's just I came to a point in my life where I had to leave, and I didn't have any way of building on that.
Right. Are you happy you've got these places that are unencumbered right now and don't have any loans, or would you have wished to leverage and carry on growing?
I couldn't carry on growing because of my partner that I had at the time.
Right.
He was very much, he almost stunted my growth with his ways that he was, because I wanted to buy more property into Leicester for students. I was looking along those lines, but he was very greedy for money, so I had to pay him a wage, and his wage was quite high, whether I had the money or not. So if it wasn't for the person I was with, then that's another lesson.
Yes.
The person that's by your side, whether they're good or bad, you've really got to consider how they're going to help you grow. Because if they're not helping you grow, then, you get stuck in a certain place, which is how I did.
What do you think when there's an imbalance in the partner? Like maybe you really love each other, but maybe one of you might have a business or one's more wealthier. Is it your why? You have to have a why to do something.
I only found my why recently, so I can't even put it down to that. I know a lot of people do that. And I think when you're good at certain things, you're good at everything, but that's only because you believe you are.
What's kept you going? What's that been that thing that there's something always there that tells you you're hungry or a situation is wrong? There's something always there. Like, what do you think is that thing that keeps you motivated just to keep going with every challenge that you have?
I mean, now it's I have people, like I had to find money for this girl yesterday to accommodate her and her son, and it's for having that money. So now I know that the more wealth I have, the more I can give. So it's never really been about me. I've actually the poorest I've ever been. I was a millionaire 6 years ago before I became homeless, but I ended up with nothing. I ended up literally with nothing.
How did you become homeless?
Well, with my partner, as I go back to that, as I said, I got pregnant for the third time.
Yes.
The violence was escalating. He was starting to set my pillow on fire as I was asleep. My daughter had to put it out. He set my hair on fire, and the smell of burning hair is very unforgettable. And I developed again another fear of fire again from before. Coming forward, he would lock us in our rooms at 11 o'clock at night and reopen them at 5, so I stopped sleeping altogether. And my daughter had gone off to university. Sorry, I keep jumping. Okay, third pregnancy. I ended up having this third pregnancy, and he said this would be it. I wouldn't have any more children because I wanted 3, because I was one of 3, and I've got this weird thing about number 3. And I was pregnant, and he was angry because I didn't have the money he wanted. He was going on a night out. I didn't have the money he wanted to hand. Sometimes there's that slight delay. And he was really angry, and he developed this way of getting rid of his frustrations by pushing me. He would push me into the wall. He would push me when I was in the car against the passenger window. He would push me down the stairs, and he pushed me down the stairs when I was 7.5 months pregnant. And he walked out, and I lay there for a while, and I started to feel a foot coming from me. And to cut a long story short, I got to the hospital and gave birth to my third child, Tyler. But he died shortly after birth. And I'm laying there and I can hear everyone else's babies crying, but mine's not. And I'm saying, why is he not crying? And it was probably the hardest point of my life, if I'm being honest, or one of the hardest, where I just wanted to give up. I literally just didn't want to look after my children, didn't want to run any businesses. The funeral was organised by the hospital because he wouldn't do anything. And I ended up just changing as a person until I got pregnant again, when he said that he would not come near me. He finds me disgusting. No man would love me, that I'm fat, I'm ugly. And I ended up giving birth to my son, who kind of saved me in a way. He kind of almost rekindled that desire to live again. It's really difficult to explain unless anyone's lost a child, but your arms are forever wanting to cradle that baby. And then my daughter went to uni. My middle son stood up to his dad because he was getting sick and tired of me being spoken to or beaten. And as I said, children are really affected by this. He was doing his GCSEs and he stood up to his dad. His dad didn't like it. And when we were facing one way, his dad came downstairs and punched him in the back of the head. And I said, you can't do that to him. You can't hit my children. And he said, oh, we just got into a bit of an argument. And I never spoke back. It was the first time I spoke back. But when it's your child, it's slightly different. But my solution, again, distorted thinking. I didn't think very straight back then. I sent him off to boarding school, which meant I had to earn more to provide, because his boarding school was very expensive. He went off to boarding school. I opened 2 or 3 more businesses, and my youngest son is being neglected, but I'm not seeing that. He's also dropped from his football team because he's developed this illness, but we don't know what it is. And it's just him and me a lot of the time, and I've took him to the hospital and we find out he's got an autoimmune disease, which is a disability. So he can't play football. He's not going to be one of the fastest people. And at the Midlands anymore, a 100-metre sprint. He's not going to be playing the game that he's played since he was 2.5. His life has changed. He's not got his brother to bounce off anymore. He's on his own. And we came out of hospital after quite a serious operation, and his father never visited him once, but he took a picture of us and sent it to my daughter, who was in a lecture. She got this picture of me asleep on the sofa. He was slumped over a table, and she instantly knew there's something wrong here. The way he was positioned, the way I was sleeping, it was daytime. I had insomnia. I didn't sleep. And she's just had this gut feeling that we were dead.
Wow.
And she tried to ring us. She didn't ring the police. She rang us. She rang until I answered. And when I did answer, my throat was super dry. And I said, let me get some water. When I went in, I realised he turned all the taps of the cooker on and the house was full of gas. So he would have done that. We had passed out. And you can die from carbon monoxide and poisoning. And anything could have triggered that spark. Yeah. So the whole house would have exploded. And he knew this. And my son eventually spoke up at school and said what's happening. He was really brave. They took him very seriously and we were removed. I wasn't allowed to take anything with me. I had 20 minutes. And when you've got 20 minutes, you panic. You're looking at your house. This is your home. This is my children's home where I brought up. I built this home, literally. Yeah. I built the extension myself with nail guns and everything. I was there. And I'm leaving it all behind. And I don't know what's going to happen. I've got nothing. I've got no parents, nobody to support me. But I'm being brave again. And I'm taking his hand. I've got my long coat on. He's got his shorts on and a really bright colour t-shirt, a Barcelona t-shirt. And we enter this safe home with nothing. I had probably a tissue that was probably less than this. And as I opened the door, I knew things were not going to be good when I stepped on that carpet and there was this squelchy noise because the carpet was just sodden. It was just full of human urine. And the walls were smeared with the human feces. And I thought, what have I done? Where have I brought him? And he was so exhausted. I cleaned up the bed with my tissue, took my coat off, wrapped him up because it was so cold. There was no heating, no bedding, nothing. It was almost like going back to my childhood, with the bare walls. And I really felt that. And I lay him down. He fell asleep really quickly. He said he felt like later on, when we spoke about it, he said that night felt like a bad dream. And that's exactly how it felt to me. And I sat in the other room and for the first time in my life, I really cried from within for my childhood, for the rape, for the child marriage, for being sold to somebody, for being constantly bitten and sexually abused, for being set on fire almost, for taking domestic violence, for some of the things he did to me and the way he treated me, taking it all. And it wasn't a pity party. It was almost like a release and a realisation that, God, you've been through so much. And I remember looking down, I had this puddle of tears almost, and I said to myself, again talking, Nina, are you going to drown in those tears? Are you going to dance in them? And I said, I've got him in the other room. I've got my other children. And it's always a reasoning with myself. I've got to reason with myself that I can't give up. I just couldn't. And I actually jumped up and we were on an estate. I'd never been anywhere like this in my life. And I started to dance. There were boys on bikes outside probably watching me. I didn't care. I didn't have any music. I was just dancing. And weirdly, I felt quite free. But I also knew that I was going to change everyone's lives again. I would do it because I had to do it. And after a little while, we got thrown out because they don't give you a safe home if you've got money. And it had come to light that I can't have benefits because on paper, I'm a millionaire. A lot of those businesses folded, by the way, because he didn't run them and I couldn't run them. We ended up having to move to, nearly 400 miles away because the police couldn't protect me. Their motto is to protect and serve. I had gone to probably 6 or 7 different police stations, but none of them could ever help me. Sometimes he was following me and he was there and they saw him in their cameras, but he didn't punch you in the face, did he? Was their reply. So the non-molestation orders didn't really help us. And when I moved, I stopped looking over my shoulder. I stopped walking on eggshells. I stopped looking for community members. I actually realised what it's like to live.